Welcome. We are thrilled that you are all here today. My name is Steve Rothstein, and I'm the Executive Director of the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation. And on behalf of James Roth from our library and all of the Library and Foundation colleagues, we are thrilled that all of you are here. Before we introduce our special guests, I do want to thank the supporters and underwriters for the forum series and for today. The Bank of America and the Lowell Institute, and Bill and Angela Lowell are with us today. The Globe, Xfinity, and BUR, we appreciate all of their support. And today, particularly, I also want to recognize the Mass Cultural Council and Anita here. So join me to thank all of them for their support. In addition to the special guests on stage, again, which I'll introduce in just a second, we're also honored to have the Irish ambassador to the United States and his wife with us today. Thank you for joining us. In addition to the people here, and actually there's an overflow room as well that people are watching. We also have many people watching online, so it's great to have you with us online. After the presentation discussion up here, there'll be question and answer time. There are two microphones you'll see halfway up, so at that point, please go up to the microphones, and again, please keep your questions brief. John Kennedy believed very importantly the arts. In fact, one of his last major speeches, roughly a month before he passed at Amherst College, when he dedicated the Robert Frost Library, he said, quote, "I look forward to an America that will reward achievement in the arts as we reward achievement in business and statecraft. I look forward to an America that will steadily raise the standards of artistic accomplishment and which will steadily enlarge cultural opportunities for all citizens. And I look forward to an America which commands respect throughout the world, not only for its strength, but for its civilization and will." So that is why we're doing this special forum today, to honor the work of President Kennedy and Mrs. Kennedy. And, you know, if I read all the awards that John Lithgow got, we'd be leaving by the time I finished them. So I will suffice it to say, Tony winner, Emmy, Screen Actors Guild, Golden Globe Award winner, best-selling author, a musician. A year ago, he actually won the Harvard Arts Medal for starting his amazing work at Harvard as well. He has brought and continues to bring culture to us in so many ways, on the big screen, the small screen, through music and books. He is also a strong advocate for arts and the importance for arts. So join me to welcome John for being here today. We appreciate that. And we could not be more excited to have our moderator, Robin Young. Robin Young is the host, as you know, of BUR and NPR's Here and Now. She also has a long list of awards from Peabody and Emmy Awards and many other things. But I can say personally, Robin, that I feel I'm a more educated person because of how much I listen to you and what I've learned from you over the years and the stories. So thank you personally for that. So join me to welcome both of them.
Hi there. There's so much to talk about. The Crown fans here, and Crown fans. Third Rock from the Sun, Daddy's Home too. So much to talk about, but I just want to start by saying I know, John, that everyone here actually is very interested in hearing about the most important thing, I think, to discuss with John Lithgow, which is the upcoming nuptials of John's nephew and my niece.
It's true. It's true.
It's like this weird thing in 1 month. Isn't that weird? It's so weird.
Here, this is our chance to toast Ben and Dia.
Ben and Dia.
Here's Ben and Dia.
And if you don't mind, I'm just going to work that in as many times as I can along the way. No, let's talk about you. I just spoke to you recently. Your wonderful Broadway one-man performance, Stories by Heart, just beautiful telling of your life. So let's find out a little bit about what people who get to see that find out. How many have seen that? Oh, it's just a wonderful performance.
Why don't I do it?
Actually, I'm going to...
You won't have to do it then.
Actually... I'm hoping we can get a taste of it. But basically, we learned that you were born in Rochester, New York, the son of a retired actress, Sarah Jane, same name as your sister, and a father, Arthur Washington Lithgow III, who loomed large in your family. a producer, director, took the family cross-country, sort of an itinerant producer-director at times. Talk about the Lithgow family.
Yes, my dad, Arthur Lithgow, his main profession was, he was a regional theater producer, director, and actor. He was a bit of a vagabond. I had a sort of gypsy wagon childhood because he created and ran Shakespeare festivals in Ohio. It's not a very secure profession. The big one, the longest running one was the Antioch Shakespeare Festival when I was between about 7 and 12 years old. He produced all of Shakespeare's plays. He got a remarkable band of resident actors, many of them fresh out of Carnegie Tech, as it was called then. And they did outdoor Shakespeare on the main building of Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio. They would produce 7 Shakespeare plays every summer in the course of 9 weeks, rehearsing in the day and performing at night.
Were you in the wings? Were you?
Oh no, I was on stage. Quite frequently as a little, I was Mustard Seed in Midsummer Night's Dream. I was a prince in the castle in Richard III. I eventually, when I was a teenager, I became a spear carrier, a messenger. My first professional line on stage was, "Ambassadors from Harry, King of England, do crave admittance to your majesty," in Henry V. And I sort of.
And did you know? I mean, obviously you're enjoying that, but did you know then? I mean, this is. I'm going to go into the family business. This is going to happen.
No, I intended not to. I almost wanted to avoid it. I was an artist. I was right until I was 19 or 20 years old. I intended to be an artist, a painter and a printmaker. I was very serious about it. I had wonderful public school arts education. One of the reasons why I go on and on about it now, in the public schools of Ohio and Massachusetts. But off I went to Harvard and fell in with the theater gang almost immediately. And by that time, I was a seasoned Shakespearean actor, mainly by osmosis.
Well, I want to ask you too about your voice, because if I remember correctly, in the play, or the performance, I think you speak of your father as having a plummy voice.
Yes.
Do you have his plummy voice? Because there's something so distinct, and maybe it's your mother's too, someone who was an actress and used her voice as a tool. Don't you think he has a very distinctive voice?
Well, he did have a wonderful stage voice. All of his Shakespeare, remember, was outdoors with no amplification. And in fact, you can find, if you look hard enough online, you can find tape recordings of the Shakespeare productions from the early 1950s. And there was my father literally shouting Shakespeare, because that's the only way you could hear it. But it was just magnificent.
Well, but he's somewhat sad, too, in the way we meet him in your work, because maybe didn't achieve what you think he could have. And then in 2002, make sure I'm at the right place here, you're taking care of both of your parents. They're in failing health. And you find this book. It's a bound but kind of falling apart book of stories, Teller of Tales. It's the same book. I mean, what a find. The same book that he used to tell you stories out of when you were a child. Mm-hmm. And you begin telling your father and mother stories. Yes. And so how would you describe your sense of your father when you came to put this whole story on stage? Someone who maybe didn't achieve what you thought he should have, or?
He had a life of extraordinary achievement, but it was not the kind of conventional extraordinary achievement in theater, let alone the entertainment business of movies and TV. It was always regional theater. He never had a great success in New York, and it was difficult. As I said, his festivals would frequently fold. He was constantly starting new things and watching. It was a struggle. It is a struggle to bring Shakespeare to the public in the Midwest. But while he was doing it, he was exuberant and creative and had a great sense of his own success. As an old man, he didn't, which was one of the sad things about taking care of him at age 86. I think it is an occupational hazard of anybody who performs for a living. If you live that long, people have forgotten what you've done. And the most important things in your life are nothing but memories. And they're memories that you don't share with anybody. Old actors, you know, they frequently feel, I've done nothing. Because what we do is of the moment. I mean, that's, the thing is, growing up as an actor, you've got to embrace and acknowledge that. What we do is of the moment. It's like lightning in a bottle. It's an electric thrill you're giving to people, which, with any luck, they'll remember it for maybe 2 and 3 years. Then it is gone. I'm sure I could tell you the most exciting things, in my opinion, that I've done in my career from 30 years ago. None of you will have ever heard of them.
Well,
and you know, you just have to acknowledge that. Well,
let's try.
that's what I do.
Hold the thought on the play, the beautiful play, because I want to throw out the remake of The Twilight Zone. What is it, 20,000 Feet in the Air? Mm-hmm. Remember the William Shatner Twilight Zone, the panicked, and then you played that character in the remake, and I think you told Bill Moyers that was one of your favorite characters.
Well, it's still one of my favorite pieces of acting, yeah. What was wonderful about it was that the first time I'd worked with a movie director who didn't tell me, take it down, John, take it down. I mean, I was a theater actor who eventually acted in movies, and it was just my instinct, you know, to play for the people in the back row. And so everyone was always saying, take it down. Not George Miller, who directed Twilight Zone, who directed Mad Max and The Fury Road. Everything, nothing was ever enough for him. More. He would say, I want to see your face crack. He was Australian. And it was like, wow, have you ever found the right actor? It was just wonderful.
And the character. I mean, you remember the character? This is the character at the window who sees something on the wing. And
yeah.
By the way, can I bring it back to the wedding, which is going to be in Ithaca, New York? So my creative writing teacher at Ithaca College in Ithaca, New York was Rod Serling.
Is that right?
Yes.
Well, Rod Serling's professor at Antioch College was Arthur Lithgow.
What?
Yet another coincidence.
My head's exploding.
It wasn't his playwriting. I don't know what he taught him, but...
well, we're back to Arthur Lithgow.
Yes, right.
And this performance that you do on stage is an homage to him by way of taking some of the stories that he used to read to you as a child, that you ended up reading to him and your mother as they were failing.
Exactly.
And you kind of act them out for us on stage. Mm-hmm. One of them, and I'm sorry, I don't have the, one was Uncle Fred Flits By. You good? In which you act all the characters in that story. The other is set in a barber shop, in which there's a man getting a shave, you're the barber, and the barber is very talkative, and he's telling a story of what he slowly realizes over the course of a half an hour of you telling us this story is a more malevolent story than he knew. Mm-hmm. Which story is that?
Haircut by Ring Lardner. Raise your hands if you know Haircut.
Okay, you all get points.
The great thing was that not many people knew it, so it was sort of springing it on them. Yeah.
Can you, I mean, we were joking only halfway about you doing that performance for us, but there was something so amazing because we're seeing John Lithgow up there. There's nothing on the stage but a wingback chair and a wall that looks like it's like a library. We're in a library. And suddenly we're in a barber shop, and suddenly you're a barber, and you've got a razor in your hand, and I swear to God, I saw the razor, but there's no razor. Can you just talk about your hands and what you did to make us think that we saw a face and we saw an ear being pulled up and we saw the razor?
Yes, it's true. I read Haircut. It's every word of the story is spoken by the barber as he's going through all this, and I thought, what a fantastic theater device to create. I love the way you describe it because it's exactly how I intended. On an empty stage, gradually in the course of a 35, 40-minute story, create a room with every single prop, every single piece of furniture, a clear sense of where the door is when it opens and closes, and my co-star, this invisible, silent customer, and to simply pantomime everything. And I got to demonstrate something that I deeply believe, which is what happens on stage is actually happening out in the imagination of the audience. It's like a deal you make with the audience. Okay, everything I do is going to be invisible. You're the one who has to give it form. Shakespeare knew all about this when he said, giving airy nothing a local habitation and a name. All of Shakespeare's plays were done on an empty stage. All my dad's Shakespeare was played on an empty unit stage. Otherwise, they couldn't run 7 plays in repertory. No scenery whatsoever. And yet there you had Illyria, Bohemia, ancient Rome, Berkshire in England for Merry Wives of Windsor. It's all in the imagination of the audience, which is the essence of my story, Stories by Heart. We all want, need, and love stories, and we don't need scenery. We don't actually even need actors. Stories are very vivid on the page, too. But I just thought, how wonderful to do a piece of theater in which it's nothing but me and my voice. I even make the sounds of even as I spoke. I learned how to master laughing and snipping and talking at the same time, I'll say. He had a strange maniacal laugh.
Well, and just talk about that laugh for a second, because as he's realizing there's sort of a misogynistic, racist backstory that he's telling about this old pal of his, that he's realizing, oh, wait a minute, this guy actually wasn't that great a man. He starts to kind of lose it, uncoil, unravel a little bit, while he has this man's life in his hands, literally with razors and scissors and things. There's a maniacal laugh that comes out. We just heard a little bit of it. And it reminded me that John Lithgow can be, just a nice guy. You do nice guy great. You also can feel malevolent at times. Talk about where that comes from, because this guy was a lot of that.
Yes, I track that back to Shakespeare too. You're hearing me talk an awful lot about Shakespeare. I don't often, but that was my background, doing those many roles, little roles, but in different plays, different nights. Shakespeare wrote Hamlet, but he also wrote Comedy of Errors. King Lear, Merry Wives of Windsor. Macbeth, As You Like It, and Twelfth Night, romantic comedies. He himself loved to surprise audiences night by night, and he was an actor himself. He loved giving actors roles that challenged and excited and surprised them. To him, I think, and his company, as it was in my dad's companies, and it was for me when I was growing up, the whole fun was just being completely different night by night, and bit by bit, with a loyal audience, delighting them that the same actors were doing such different things. It just gives you the opportunity to really surprise people. Therefore, when I get very well known for doing a silly comic in Third Rock from the Sun, it becomes a wonderful weapon almost to shock and horrify them when I do Dexter. It's like you expect one thing and then it's something else.
The duality.
Duality is my favorite word for acting. To show two sides of one character and surprise them moment to moment, not to mention role to role.
Yeah, but when you're doing Third Rock from the Sun, and I've talked to actors who have said that, you get into a role and it's the nice guy, and it's not, do you resent it because it's only asking of that one dimension?
That's what a good question. I never wanted to do an episodic sitcom. In fact, it's a secret that has finally come out. I was asked to play the role of Fraser, and I turned it down because I didn't want to do a sitcom. Then along came this pitch meeting for Third Rock from the Sun. Bonnie and Terry Turner, this husband and wife comedy writing team who created Third Rock, they had been on the writing staff of Saturday Night Live 2 of the 3 times I was a guest host in the 1980s. So they wrote comic review material that I performed, and they saw me as a comic. And they became very good friends. My agent called me one day and said, your friends from New York, Bonnie and Terry Turner, want to have breakfast with you. And I thought, great, I'd love to see them. So I went off thinking this was a social engagement. And there were Bonnie and Terry and Carsey and Werner and Karen Mandabach, all these big shot Hollywood television producers at the Four Seasons in Beverly Hills. And I thought, oh my God, I've been ambushed. This is a pitch. How am I, and you know, of course they got around to saying what they wanted to have breakfast about. They said, Terry, why don't you tell him? He says, well, we're developing this series about these 4 aliens. And I thought, how am I going to just say no as graciously as I can and get out of here? Within 5 minutes, he'd persuaded me to be in Third Rock from the Sun. Because just exactly what you said, it was an opportunity to surprise people and be far, far more than any one thing, even though it's only one character. These were aliens who were trying to figure out how to be humans. So they kept trying different approaches and trying to plumb the depths of different human mysteries. Well, that's what we're all doing. And doing it in this hilarious comedy context with this great premise that allowed me, a character actor, to just do everything week by week. So finally I was brought around and you know, at the end of that breakfast, I looked at this table of delightful people and I thought, what have I been holding out for all these years? This is going to be great.
Yeah, why not have some fun?
Yeah.
And it was Bonnie Turner who I think you told you in a very complimentary way that you had a bland face.
Yes, that's right.
Right? It was
Yeah.
because she meant what?
Well, she was talking about kind of what you were just implying. She said, you know, you have a very neutral face, and you never know which way it's going to go. Therefore, you can surprise people with it. You know, it's not your face is not just one thing. When Dexter came along, there was a TV Guide review of it, and a very complimentary review of my performance. But it described me as a bland blob of a man. And I chose to take that as a compliment. But I sort of know what they're talking about, because that's exactly what I try to do, moment to moment, even in the course of a scene, to find the moments when you can upend people's expectations. Because that's what you're waiting for and looking for.
And it's almost as if, I mean, I can see you as a young man, very, very young, looking in the mirror and thinking, why couldn't I, you know, the Paul Newman face, Robert Redford face, why, you know, but that would have limited you.
You know, it's true. I have a couple of friends who are gorgeous young men. It was something that Christopher Reeve always lived with. He really felt it was an enormous liability being so conventionally handsome. He was a great Superman, but he never really had a great success as an actor apart from that. And he always blamed it on that unconsciously. I think it's true. It's very hard to, I don't know, there are plenty of great actors with great faces. I'm not saying
that we're not saying that John Lithgow
No.
isn't damn good looking over
no.
here.
I know I'm not. I know what bland blob means.
Yeah, but it's what you do with it. And Churchill. Churchill.
Churchill was a bland blob of a man.
Yeah, and look at that, you know. When you first told some British friends that they were talking to you about Churchill and the Crown, You say their faces fell.
Yeah, right.
That must have been encouraging. But how worried were you?
I wasn't that worried at first, but Nick Heitner is a great friend of mine, Sir Nicholas Heitner, who was for 15 years the director of the National Theatre. Really a brilliant Englishman. I told him by email that the good news, I will be coming to London for about a 8-month-long job. And I said, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it's not theater. And he sent back an email saying, my guess is it's this show called The Crown about the English royals. What role would it be? The prince, the old king? If it's Winston Churchill, you should know that every actor in London will have a contract out for you. And I sort of swallowed hard when I read that. A couple of weeks later, Nick was in New York, and I had supper with him and a lot of other friends. And I got in the taxi with him, and I said, Nick, it's true. It's Churchill in The Crown. And his answer was, they will kill you. and he said it without any irony at all. And I really was frightened. And I also didn't know whether The Crown was going to be any good. Boy, was it ever good.
What happens the first time? I mean, I want to hear more about how you overcame that fear, because you obviously did. But what happens the first time someone says to you, Churchill? Do you turn to the mirror and try it on?
Well, it was, the call came from my agents, who told me that Peter Morgan and Stephen Daldry, the writer and director and producers of The Crown, had picked me and only me for this role. And I said yes immediately, even though I was completely astonished.
Had you thought about Churchill before?
No, of course. Me, Churchill? No. But I thought, if they have thought of me for this, they know something I don't know. And I was so excited to work with both of them. I always wanted to work with Daldry. And Netflix was involved. It was just clearly, and my agents were ecstatic because they knew how good this was. So I was tremendously excited. I just knew it was going to be a big challenge, and it was going to be a big challenge winning over about 50 of England's best theater and film actors. Yeah. But they greeted me with open arms. I mean, they had more confidence in me than I had in myself. Oh, that was to your face. I did notice that they'd painted a target on my back.
So how did you do it? You said once that things you found out about a younger Churchill actually were the things that really informed you.
Yes.
Like what?
Well, I read that amazing trilogy of books by William Manchester, The Last Lion, which is a whole, I guess it's put it all together, it's about a 2,000-page biography of Churchill. And the one that had the most impact on me was the first volume, because it told the story of his childhood and his young years. And that was the part of Churchill. I had done a job in which I played FDR with Bob Hoskins as Winston Churchill and Michael Caine as Stalin, go figure, on television in the early 1990s, written by our mutual friend David Rintells. And so I'd done a lot of research on that period, almost all of it about Roosevelt, but I learned a lot about Churchill in wartime. And I'd always heard the irony that Churchill had this unhappy childhood, but it was extraordinary to read about it. I mean, he was such a neglected child that grew up with such a strong sense of his shortcomings as a failure. You know, he was a privileged child, but there was no thought of him going to Oxford or Cambridge. He went to Sandhurst, the military school, and he didn't do well there. He was a misfit, and so much of his life was a study in overcompensation.
I was going to say, where does that come out in your character?
He was growing old. And I think when somebody grows old, it's fascinating how his childhood is manifest in his second childhood, that is, in his old age. I just found that, I found that at the very heart of his insecurity as an old man.
That he wanted to be loved so
Well,
much.
that's one aspect of it. But the fact that his storyline in The Crown is hanging on to his role as Prime Minister, hanging on to his power and his viability and his sense of himself as the man who saved England.
Walk into the church wedding with the music playing.
Yes, right.
So that,
But he was so skillful he was incredibly smart, of course, and incredibly courageous in so many ways. But there's your duality. He was also insecure, he was fretful, he was extremely sentimental and weepy and maudlin.
the scene with the painter painting his portrait.
It was a gift.
Which he rejected.
A gift to an actor. I mean, that whole episode was a beautiful piece of writing. And it was all about vulnerability and an old man and an old man's vanity. And his roaring sort of lion in winter anger, his rage at growing old. It was Lear-like. And so
And
beautifully
you played Lear.
written. Huh?
You've played Lear.
I have played Lear, yeah. And
Central Park.
I saw a lot of connections between the two.
Yeah. By the way, did you ever hear from people who might have been, discounting you? Did you ever hear somebody come around and say, I didn't think you could, but you did? A British actor? Or?
Oh yeah, they were extremely complimentary. You can't believe compliments, or I just reflexively do not believe compliments.
Really?
Yeah, I'm guilty of it myself. You walk into a dressing room to greet an actor after performance. The only thing you can say is, "You were wonderful." That's the only thing you can say. So I know it comes around the other way.
That'll just stay in here.
It's a truism.
So Churchill was okay, but Daddy's Home too. Playing Will Ferrell's father.
Yeah.
What genius to have. How much fun was that?
It was wonderful fun. It was right here just a year ago in Boston. No, Will and I as father and son was just a match made in heaven. He is, you'll all be happy to know, if you didn't know already, he is the most wonderful guy in show business. He is just such a sweetheart. And
Is he loose, like when he's hanging with people? Because when you interview him, he gets very he can be very cat and mousey, and very.
You have interviewed him?
Yeah, several times.
Really?
And out of the interview, he'll be looser, but in the interview, it's almost. And this can happen a lot with comics. They don't want you to treat them as a comic and try to,
I think that's true, and I imagine it's quite a challenge, but also a fascinating thing to interview him.
Yeah.
I was a little surprised by that myself. I did a lot of interviews with him, and with Mel Gibson and Mark Wahlberg. We did a lot of the press together. He does have that reflex to make you laugh. But one-on-one, it's always a little tricky making somebody laugh. And also, Will's comedy is very offbeat and off-center. The things that he says that are so hilariously funny, they're not traditional, they're not recognizable, conventional jokes. There's no set-up punchline. It's all oblique. He has a kind of comedy alter ego, a man named Chris Henchy, whom you may have met in the course of things, who's always around, because he and Chris think exactly the same. He always has little ideas for things to say.
They do the Funny or Die videos.
Yeah.
So that these videos where one of the recurring ones is Will Ferrell comes to the door and there's a 2-year-old, which I think is his daughter.
A little baby.
A little baby who screams at him. And it's
his landlady, isn't it?
Yeah, it's his landlady who abuses him.
Yeah.
And she's this tiny little thing.
Yeah.
So as you say, it's not
Yeah,
predictable.
and in an interview, you know, that kind of thing doesn't really work.
Well, what about you in this film? I mean, here we are talking about some of this beautiful high culture that you've contributed to.
Yeah.
Churchill and you know, the plays that you've done and the Tony Awards. And there you are with, as you said, Mark Wahlberg, who we love, but still Mark Wahlberg, Mel Gibson, Will Ferrell. I'm looking at that panel, I'm thinking, you know, the Sesame Street song, which of these does not belong? And it would be, I mean, none of them had done Lear.
Uh-huh.
So how does that go on the set?
Well, I thought it was fantastic to wrap up Churchill and then play Don in Daddy's Home
Well,
Too.
who do you say you adore? A mailman who just talks a mile a minute? I'm asking, when I said I was coming here, I have other younger nephews. They were so excited. The guy in Daddy's Home Too.
Well,
they don't know anything else.
You have to remember, I'm a sort of equal opportunity entertainer. I entertain children from 3 to 8 in my kids' concerts and write books for them.
And you've won several Grammys for the children's work.
I haven't won any, but I'm not going to disabuse them of that.
Maybe the nomination.
I've been nominated.
Yes, that counts.
4 times. But and the same goes for a big commercial studio comedy. It surprised me they wanted me for it. I read it and was lukewarm because I didn't know what was funny about the character. And then I met with the writers, the writer and the co-writer and the director. And we talked together, where is the funny here? I just don't get it. I mean, and here you know what's funny about Mel Gibson playing that role and Mark Wahlberg playing that role, and certainly you know what's funny about Will Ferrell. He's Will Ferrell. But there's this kind of neutral fourth character, and I didn't see where does he fit in. And the thought of being in scenes of 4 guys in which I'm the only one with nothing funny to do, like Zeppo Marx. You know, I just didn't get it, and I didn't want to do it. But I got together with them, and together I said, look, the only thing I can find here is the fact that he likes everybody, and he never stops talking. And so let's work on that. What if he has a completely boring, dull job, which he thinks is the most exciting job in the world? He can't stop talking about it, and the only person who thinks it's just as exciting as he thinks it is his son, Will Ferrell. Then I think we'd have something. And it wasn't in the script at all, but I said, why don't you just set up scenes where all you have to do is turn me on, and I'll start improvising about how exciting the post office business is. And sure enough, that's what we did. Before shots, they would say, John, can you think of something? And I said, just a second. And I'd get on my iPhone, and I would look up like the history of the zip code, or you know, or the second and third postmaster generals. And I would just start talking about this with great. This was so hilarious. Unfortunately, there's very little of it in the finished film, but it was really great, and it was sort of a way into our funny relationship, and the fact that we completely adored each other, and that was the premise of the film. This pairing of Will and I, a father and son who adore each other, and Mel and Mark, these 2 sourpusses who hate each other, and how gradually one pair learns from the other and the other way around. It became not only very funny, but also a very sweet movie.
Oh, I've seen it several times. And in fact, my nephew Josh just texted me, please tell him I said hi. You'll meet him at the wedding. Because they watch it over and over and over again. Over and over and over again. And maybe there's something about the father-son thing.
Listen, every comedy is something I remember Jim Burrows saying, the great sitcom director. And it's completely self-evident, but the most important word in comedy is emotion. You've just got to care about these characters. there's got to be something at stake, because that's the audience's way in. There's some dilemma, which is an emotional crisis, and that's where the funny comes.
We want to have time for audience questions, so we'll be thinking about those as we head to those. But that father-son theme brings us back to you and your father. And I was thinking, I do have the list here. 2 Tonys, 6 Emmys, 2 Golden Globes, 3 Screen Actor Guild Awards, 4 Drama Desk Awards, 2 Academy Awards.
No.
2 Academy Award nominations.
Yes.
But in my mind, and 4 Grammy nominations.
Yeah.
And some honorary thing from Harvard.
Actually, I just to interrupt you for a second.
Yeah.
I introduced the clip from Silence of the Lambs on the Oscars years ago, and Billy Crystal was the host, and he took his eye off the teleprompter for a second and introduced me as John Lithgow, 2-time Oscar winner. And I came out on stage feeling a lot better about myself. And this is the first time I've ever told people that that's not true. Now you can go.
That's okay. On my resume on the website for hearingnow.org, it says I have 25 years of broadcast experience. I wrote that 15 years ago, and I'm not changing. But maybe it's because there are a lot of people who think, why wouldn't you have won for, is it Terms of Endearment? World According to Garp, I mean, such extraordinary performances. But all of this, and I'm wondering if maybe the most important honor for you was the one you gave by being on the stage in this just extraordinary, I hope you mount it again, the Stories by Heart. When you get to, and you say this, you say Arthur Lithgow, and then you say, I got to say, my father's name was finally said on Broadway. You put your father on Broadway.
Yeah.
Oh.
No, it was a lucky thing that not many actors have the opportunity to pay tribute to their father in such a way. I remember I worked twice with Jason Robards, the great Jason Robards. The first half of his career, he was always referred to as Jason Robards Jr. because his father was a distinguished actor named Jason Robards. And I asked him those years ago when I was young, and he was a venerated actor, and a kind of gruff. He was very well known for being a tough customer, Jason. And I asked him about his father, and I said, "Did you ever work with him?" And he said, "I did indeed have that great honor." And I thought, oh God, that was such a beautiful thing to say, and it surprised me so much. We go back to this whole thing about what we do is temporary, and the fact that we have to acknowledge and live with the fact that it won't last. It's different from an oil painter or a writer. People who perform on stage, they're just there for the audience at that moment. And it's lovely to think back on those things, but they are gone.
They're ephemeral.
So it was just wonderful to be able to just tell people this was an extraordinary man.
So that, to me, would be the end of the bucket list, being able to do that for my father. But what are you thinking of? Because you talked about the current political climate and how you've said several times it would be a gift to an actor. The current president would be a gift to an actor? Am I hearing you correctly? That
To play?
To play.
Oh
yeah.
my God, what a role.
You don't mean like Alec Baldwin.
Well, no, you're fascinated by mysterious characters. And this is a deeply mysterious character. And I mean, I don't mean that as a laugh line at all. I mean, complex, complicated man. I mean, what can you say?
Well, I often think about, his brother, Fred, who was the most beloved one and most accomplished one, and then became an alcoholic and died young from alcoholism. I often wonder, I would of anybody, that's a public figure, I often think, what are the marionette strings?
Yeah.
So.
Well, he's just, but I genuinely think it would be fascinating somebody is going to write some amazing dialogue that involves Donald Trump and sort of plumb the depths of this character. I mean, what's much more complex is what this one single person has done to an entire nation and society and the world. I mean, that's a gigantic idea. And at some point in the next 20 years, this is going to be examined in drama, I think.
Well, we're fingers crossed that it's
I'm
you that
available.
gets to- yeah. John Lithgow. So we have the microphones there. I'm going to ask you to start queuing up. We didn't get to World According to Garp or Terms of Endearment or so many things. At a certain point, obviously, we might have to tamp down the lines. Be careful. You know, I was walking out here. There's no way I would want to, try to steal a scene from John Lithgow, but I actually almost fell.
Yeah.
And you know what's not funny? A few months ago, I was in the Cambridge Side Galleria parking garage, and I did the same exact thing. I slipped and fell into sort of a gymnastic Olympic split, and I severed my hamstring from the
My
bone.
God.
If I had fallen
Robin.
there, yes, I have Tom Brady's surgeon.
God, I had my back turned.
I
I missed
know.
the whole thing. That's the most dramatic thing that happened today.
It is. And had it gone
Yeah.
to its fruition, it would have been, a gurney. So do we have some questions? Go for it.
Mr. Lithgow, congratulations on your Emmy for
Thank
portraying Winston Churchill. My question is, I would think you probably saw The Darkest Hour.
Yeah.
With, what did you think of
Gary Oldman.
Gary's Oldman's performance, and how did it compare?
Well,
over the years?
they were
Thank you.
very different. I thought he was terrific. The whole piece was extremely different. His was much more historical. The magic of The Crown is, even though it's about these extremely famous people, the royals and everybody around the royals in the early 1950s, front and center is the characters and what's happening among them. This was all about Winston Churchill and the war and making gigantic political decisions and military decisions in the middle of a war. So it's the difference between a real character study and a historical study. I thought he was very, very good in it. I was almost relieved that I could watch it without any discomfort. It was so different from what I'd done. And I admire it. I emailed him to congratulate him the minute it happened.
Would you tell us if you didn't admire it?
No,
judging.
I know. I told you how I behave in a dressing room.
Yes.
Hi, John. I'd like to ask you about one of your movies from about 30 years ago, The Adventures of Buckaroo
I knew
Banzai.
it. I knew
Yes!
it.
Someone would ask.
When anybody starts a question with that, I know it's going to be about Buckaroo Banzai.
Did you realize it was going to be the cult classic that it is? And what attracted you to the character of Dr. Emilio Lizardo with John Warfin?
Yeah, well, that was another one that I turned
Describe
down.
this crazy character for those who might not
Yes.
have.
Raise your hands if you know even what I'm talking about when I say Buckaroo Banzai. That's not bad. It's a completely wild, crazy kind of comic book movie that's tongue-in-cheek, but is kind of exciting. I mean, it's got an exciting adventure story about this brilliant Buckaroo Banzai character. I am the villain of the piece, and there never was a villain like this. Back in the 1930s, the body of a brilliant Italian surgeon was taken over by an evil dictator from another planet, Lord John Warfin. So you had Dr. Emilio Lizardo taken over by Lord John Warfin. That was 50, 80 years ago. You cut to the present, and this body has grown older, and inside this Italian physicist is this crazy alien. It's just crazy, nuts. I mean, I had this very broad comic Italian accent. I had a wild red wig, and the character was fueled by electricity and Twinkies. And we decided that that metabolism of his body was screwed up so that he was constantly freezing cold. So I wore 2 of everything, and my teeth had rotted over time. Just an insane character. He had these catchphrase lines like, "Laugh a while you can, monkey boy." It's just crazy. I wanted to have a good Italian accent. So there was a tailor for MGM who had done my costumes. He tailored my costumes for 2 or 3 movies. And he had this wonderful accent. So I had him speak all my lines into a tape recorder, and I sort of worked off of that. His name was Roberto Terminelli. And I asked them at the end of the film, can we get an end credit as my dialect coach for Roberto Terminelli? And they did it. And for years afterwards, I would get 4 or 5 calls a year from other actors saying, "John, who was that great dialect coach?" I just loved the idea. The whole thing was a completely nutty experience, but I don't think I've ever done anything except Third Rock where I didn't laugh so hard all day long, every day of the shoot. It was just hilarious and wonderful time. So I'm glad you asked about it, and anybody who has not seen Buckaroo Banzai, go and see me at my most shameless.
Yes.
Robin and John, I wanted to thank you both for your life's work. John, I was hoping you might share some of your childhood memories of Yellow Springs and Clifton Gorge, that area. I spent a fair amount of time there myself.
Yeah.
And then my second part of my question is just the next 5 years, how do you hope to challenge yourself?
Donald Trump. Can I just throw in, as you consider the Yellow Springs,
Yeah.
did I read that Coretta Scott King was your babysitter?
Yes. Yeah. Coretta, she was then Coretta Scott. She was a student at Antioch, and she babysat for me and my sister Robin, and was a student teacher at Antioch School, where it was the lab school of Antioch. So yeah, that's my connection to Coretta.
There you go.
I don't really remember her. I was really little, but I met her in my adult life. She was a friend of a producer of a play I was in, and we met at the opening night party. She's the one who told me that she had babysat for me, and I was astonished, as you can imagine. And I said, well, what was I like? She said, "You were very well behaved." So I thought, well, I have my compliment from Coretta Scott King. And memories of Yellow Springs were just idyllic. It was like Mark Twain writing about his memories of life in Missouri as a child. It was a Midwestern idyll. I remember Glen Helen and Clifton Gorge. Went to Boy Scout camp at that Camp Birch. Yeah, did you go? Wait a minute, I remember you! It was wonderful. Sadly, I was last there in 6th grade, and that was a big demarcation in my life. At that point, off we went on my father's kind of Gulliver-like picaresque journey through the Midwest, producing Shakespeare all over the place. I still have a couple of friends from Yellow Springs. A lot of them showed up when I did my one-man show.
You had mentioned them,
Yeah.
actually. So.
Yeah, it was great. And
Great.
you are from Yellow Springs?
Just my high school. I moved around a lot as a child as well, and I
Yeah.
spent my high school and college years there. So.
Yeah. Bryan High?
No, I was in Beaver Creek, the Battling Beavers.
Yep. Yeah, the Battling
Do you two want to go somewhere?
Beavers. Sorry, I just went on a sentimental journey.
I want to give the others a chance, but the next 5 years challenge.
Yes. I don't know, have no idea. I never do. That's the thing. I will probably do a movie that starts in June and ends in August. It's going to be another
What is it? Can
barn
we know?
burner. I'm not going to tell you. But it may surprise you yet again,
Okay.
Robin.
Okay.
Just remember the name Stephen King.
Oh,
But that has just come up. I'm not sure I will or will not do it, but it's very exciting. Scare the daylights out of people. And beyond that, I just don't know. There have been some theater things that I've been considering, but you know, it's a very unpredictable life. If you're lucky, your jobs keep coming your way, but they always keep coming your way like a maximum of 3 or 4 months before you actually do them, but very often 2 or 3 weeks before you do them. This movie I'm doing right now, I found out about 2 weeks ago. And it's my chance to work with Emma Thompson, so I was not going to say no. I tend to be other people's brainstorms. It's like the Churchill story. The most exciting jobs for me have been ones that I never expected or thought I could even do. Very often they scared the hell out of me. But other smart people had thought I was right for it. You know, we actors, we think of ourselves as one thing, but the people who hire us and the people who watch us, they think way outside the box. They have a broader horizon for me than I have for myself, so I just sit and wait. Thank you so much. You bet.
Is it chapter 2?
No.
Okay.
Have you already checked it out?
I was Googling.
Now Google a little longer and you'll know.
Okay, I'm excited.
But don't tell them.
I won't. Yes.
Hi. First of all, thank you for your time here today. And if this question doesn't pertain to this forum, feel free to skip over it. But since you yourself have lived such a fascinating life, I'm curious, what piece of life advice do you have for us in the audience today?
Wow. Well, I don't presume to give advice about much, but I do have advice for people who want to act.
Okay,
And that
I'll
is,
take it.
and to people who want to act as a profession, I tell them, don't do it. It's a profession that's just full of rejection, disappointment, failure,
Kind of like life, yes.
long periods of worrying, will I ever work again? It's nothing but sacrifice and hardship. But I say, if you're going to be an actor, you're going to ignore everything I say, and so you should. You know, I've had a wonderful acting career, and I know it's an enviable one, and there aren't many people who arrive at 72 years old and are still sought after, actually sought after. That's so rare, and I feel like an incredibly lucky actor. But I never have forgotten the years leading up to age 27 before I got a single acting job in New York. And the only acting jobs I had in the profession were working with my father, which at a certain point I didn't want to do anymore. I felt I had to do it on my own. And those were really hard, scary years. And I know a lot of actors who reach the age of 40 and still haven't gotten into the ring. They still aren't on that short list of actors that always work. And that's, you know, it's hard to even have conversations with them about the business because I feel so badly for them. And I want to, the other thing that I say to young actors and to everybody, have something in your life that's more important to you than acting. Something that's creative. Something that gives you a goal that's all yours and that doesn't depend on somebody calling you up and hiring you. So you're not sitting around and waiting for that. Write. If you want to play a role, produce it for yourself. Try directing. Learn tap dancing. Take voice lessons. Paint pictures. Do something that is creative. Give yourself a goal and an aim and a project. Chances are you'll never achieve it. And the reason will be somebody will hire you to act. But in the meantime, you've got your creative juices. You're in charge of your own creative life. And I've followed exactly that advice my entire career, which is why I've written children's books. And last week I performed with a bunch of Met Opera singers at the Carnegie Hall. You know, I danced with the New York City Ballet in a ballet that I wrote myself. You know, just constantly, just make life exciting for yourselves that does not depend on other people's hiring you, because the hardest thing to live with as an actor, the hardest thing to deal with is being rejected by people you have contempt for. Find ways of avoiding that. That's my advice.
Thank
Good
you so
advice.
much.
Thank you. Over here.
Hi. You've achieved a great level of success that your father may have found enviable, and I imagine he lived to see a good part of it. So I wonder, was he proud of you? Was he happy for you? And if he did, how did he let you know that?
Oh, he was enormously proud. He didn't often say it directly. In fact, I found out sometimes obliquely by other ways. There was a wonderful man who used to work for him as a tech director who insisted when he was an old man that he should sit and record just his own history. And I saw these recordings, and in that he talked about me as an actor, said things that he never told me. He described the beginning of M. Butterfly, where I was sitting on stage, waiting to speak, and just looking at the audience with a cigarette in my hands. And then I began to speak. And he described that as this incredibly powerful moment of the theater. And he said, "That's acting." And it was just so moving to me, you know, because I knew that he felt that way. He felt that pride. And my first success came at the moment when he was suffering his first real failures. He lost his job at McCarter Theater, which he had been running for 10 years. And that terrible irony in our two lives would have been hard for any other man, but he was completely proud, you know, and I think that pride was undiluted, which is something I'm very, very grateful for.
You just answered my question, so I'm going to ask you something else, which is, what is your favorite fact about the post office?
You know, I've forgotten most of that. I've forgotten all sorts of things, like exactly what the system was of the zip code, you know, and when it was invented. I remember learning about Benjamin Franklin's son-in-law. Ben Franklin was the first postmaster general, and he passed the job on to his son-in-law, which struck me as slightly nepotistic. That's a little interesting factoid.
Maybe it's a new job for Jared.
I beg pardon?
I said, that might be a new job for Jared.
Well, don't give him any ideas.
Yes.
I have a brief comment and then a question. First of all, my wife Arlene and I are here together. We saw you in Harvard acting in some of your earlier roles, and to see you so potent and so charming still is wonderful. That's the comment.
As you are.
Well, I want to say you're with someone who is extremely gifted in the crafting of questions, so I must say any question we attempt to ask, by contrast, won't quite make it. But I get one word keeps on entering my mind as I listen to you and Robin speak there, and that is the word satisfaction. I feel you've projected today satisfaction in work, satisfaction in life. Is this an accurate response on my part anyway? And is there anything that you feel now that you would have done very differently in either of those categories, and that you wish now in the future to accomplish?
Well, thank you for that question. I've turned down a couple of jobs that I sure wish I had not turned down. I'm sure I have the record for the most roles played by an actor in a role which I had turned down.
Can you tell us what some of the other ones are? You mentioned Frasier.
I wouldn't do that to
No.
my colleagues.
Really? Okay.
But it is quite extraordinary. Tony Awards have gone to lots of people in roles that I turned down. I mean, you can't live without those regrets, mainly because you have to make choices like 3 or 4 times a year if you are a very lucky actor like me. You have to choose all the time. And long ago, I devised a motto for myself: at such moments, don't worry, because whatever choice you make, it's sure to be the wrong one. So, but in general, my career is more than satisfying to me. I feel extraordinarily fulfilled. And you mentioned satisfaction in different areas of life. I'm almost embarrassed that I've gotten through this long an interview without mentioning my wife and my family. And when I talk about things that are more important to me than my work, that's certainly that. My wife Mary is a professor, and we have a professor at UCLA, which is why I live in California, not New York. And we've been together 38 years, and she's my other self. So that's a source of incredible satisfaction and fulfillment. And again, it's put my crazy profession into a perspective that not many actors have, and I'm extremely grateful for that. I hope that that's answered your question. But in terms of satisfaction, an actor is a restless animal, and there's no question about it. It's never quite right. It's never quite right. And then when it is, it's over the top, extravagantly right, to the point where you should really just calm down. You know, it's very important to have those things in your life that gives you some sense of proportion and perspective. And there's so many examples of actors who have not had that luxury.
Yes.
Yeah, I just would love to hear your thoughts on your more recent work on Trial and Error and what you thought when you read that script, the roller skating, all of that.
Good. I loved it. It was hilarious. I thought it was completely hilarious. Many of you may not have heard of this. It was an NBC series last year that was so unique and oddball that a lot of people didn't even know it was there. It was a satire of this new vogue of documentary murder stories, real-time, real crime murder stories. And this was a total send-up of this, and I was this oddball defendant. It was hilariously funny. I enjoyed it a lot, and I thought it was hysterical. But it was very, very hard to do. It's single-camera sitcom, which is a distinction probably not many of you are aware of, the difference between multi-camera and single-camera. Third Rock from the Sun was multi-camera, and it was about 10 times more fun. You're performing for an audience. You perform the whole thing in one night between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. It's like preparing a wonderful piece of theater in 5 days every week. And every 2 or 3 weeks, you get a week off for the writers to just catch up. It was a really great gig. Something like a Trial and Error, a single camera sitcom is like a movie that never ends. And believe me, movie making is the most boring thing you can do with your life. So that was a hardship. But I was delighted by the show. I thought it was hilarious, and I'm glad you asked about it.
You played the eccentric poetry professor accused of the hilariously bizarre murder of his wife.
Yes, that's right.
And who keeps making it hard for your young lawyer because you keep doing things that make it look like you did it.
Yeah, kind of like Donald Trump, now that you mention it. And I actually, turns out I did play him after all. No. I actually urge you all to get on NBC.org or whatever.com and see Trial and Error. It's really, really funny. They are doing the second season right now, but I'm not in it. The format of the show is that it's a new defendant and a new case every year, and I've been replaced by Kristen Chenoweth, a source of great pride on my part.
Yes, I think we're, this side? Which side are we? Doesn't matter, go ahead.
I'm sure we all love your work on the screen, and I'm sure if we walk backstage after your act's on stage, we'd all say, wonderful, absolutely wonderful. But mine refers back, my question refers to you being behind the scenes. I personally love, and I think many of us do, love Good Will Hunting. And it's
Sorry?
Good Will.
Good Will Hunting.
Yes.
And it's my understanding that you helped convince Harvard and MIT to allow them to film on those campuses when that was forbidden. Is that true?
It's not true, I'm afraid. I mean, they may have invoked me because I do have this bogus title, Master of the Arts at Harvard, which Jeremy Knowles, God rest his soul, the wonderful Dean of Faculty of Arts and Sciences, he devised that title for me because of Arts First, the festival that I started in the 90s. They probably threw my name around when they were trying to persuade me to let them use, you know, Wigglesworth Hall or something.
What did you think of the film?
Yeah.
What did
Dynamite.
you think of it? What did you
Oh,
think
what
of
did
it?
I think of it? Oh, I loved the film. And I tremendously admire Matt Damon. He's a absolutely terrific guy. Raise your hands if your neighbors or know Matt Damon.
Well, we all know his mother. I mean, you know, but
Yeah.
are you saying that you don't admire Ben Affleck? What did we just hear there?
That's right. Ben Affleck was involved.
Yes.
No, I'm not saying anything about Ben Affleck. I'm just saying how much I admire Matt.
Yeah.
Your niece and nephew, Small World Story, were you going to be together in Ithaca?
I'm sorry.
The Small World Story about your nieces and nephews being together in Ithaca?
Yeah.
Just reminds me of your role in the Manhattan Project. And my nephew played Max. And I watched that movie, and in the credits it showed that a nephew of mine interviewed him as the FBI agent in one scene. Both young men didn't realize they had the same grandmother. And that film will always live in my life and my family because of that. So thank you for that role.
Well, I'm so glad we're connected.
We have a 6 degrees of John Lithgow
Yeah,
here.
right.
Like, everybody's related.
I actually, I did not mean to diss Ben Affleck, by the way.
I know.
We acted together in The Accountant, had a great
right.
time with him.
That's right.
Matt won the Harvard Arts Medal 2 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, and I had the pleasure of interviewing him and spending a weekend.
I wasn't starting something. But it will be on the Metro, back of the Metro section tomorrow.
No, it's already online.
I can't believe they got rid of the Tasty. Whenever I think of Good Will Hunting, I think of those scenes where he's sitting with Driver in the Tasty in Harvard
Think
Square.
how I feel about Elsie's.
Elsie's
That's
Sandwich
how
Shop.
far I go back.
Anyway.
Those were the days.
Well, thank you for being so personal and inspirational. And what would be your advice for overcoming anything for success, like the fears we have for being successful? We all have that comfortable spot in our life. And what would be your advice for overcoming that and to taking, like even my life or anybody else's life, up to the next level and not being fearful of that?
You know, that's such a large question that I'm going to ask you to ask it again. I'm having such trouble understanding.
Because what
would be your greatest fear, and what recommendation would you make to someone to just go for it?
To go far?
To take your life up another level. I think what you're saying.
Gosh, I
Without
don't know. I
fear.
just think keep learning and stay curious. You know, success is so, it's such a false concept in so many ways. You know, I'm in show business where success is sort of exploded into this big public fireworks display. You know, we have all these awards shows and entertainment programs on TV. And it's like all of us in the business are chasing this will-o'-the-wisp, and it's really false. Some of the most important work to me has been stuff that nobody saw. You know, early stuff I did in regional theaters, a lot of stuff on theater, period, which is seen by a fraction of the number of people who will see one episode of one sitcom that I've done. Success has so much to do with what's inside you and what makes you feel fulfilled. And I think as far as actors go, you just can never lose sight of the fact that it is it's a gift. It's a gift to audiences. You have to derive your satisfaction for how much you have given to them. And I think it's important to be humble for that reason, and not make a big extravaganza out of your own life. You know, keep your priorities. I am talking so pretentiously on this. But it comes from a genuine feeling. I mean, there's plenty of, I always say, stay humble, cultivate humility. You never know when you're going to need it. And I think that applies to the acting profession, but it applies to all of us, I think.
Don't burn any bridges.
Thank you.
We have one last question.
This question actually comes from Twitter, people watching online. This is Rachel. She's a music teacher. And she wanted to know what inspired you to write your children's books, which she says are wonderful, by the way.
Oh, thank you. It's a wonderful question to end with. You know, I have a baby sister, my sister Sarah Jane, who is the mother of the fiance of Robin's niece. I got that right, didn't I?
Yes, you did.
She's 10 years younger than I, and growing up, I was like her third parent. We were very close, and I loved to entertain her as a little child. My own children came along 20 years after that. I actually taught myself guitar in order to sing kids' songs to Ian, my first son. And those turned into a kids' concert that I would do in classrooms and school assemblies, just me and the guitar. I did, when I became a well-known actor, particularly during Third Rock, I had the opportunity to try things that I'd never tried before. You know, you become a TV celebrity and someone will say yes to anything you ask. You have to be a little careful with that. But I asked if I could make an album for kids. Once the album came out, I called up Carnegie Hall and I asked if I could give a concert with the St. Luke's Orchestra. And 6 months later, I was giving a concert. And once I gave the concert, I asked if I could turn some of my songs into books, and I became a children's book author. All of it was entertaining children, which in its way is even more satisfying than entertaining adults. And it's also something I deeply believe in, that it's my highest aspiration to give little children a great first experience in a concert hall. That's the long answer to your short question. It started entertaining my baby sister, continued entertaining my children, and I've just always had such a love for it. It just has become a sort of under the radar second career of mine that I haven't given up yet.
Lucky us. Oh, and his baby sister will be at the wedding.
That's right.
I just want to say, what great questions. I want to thank everybody from the JFK Library. As honored as we are to have John Lithgow here, I just want to point out, Liz Murphy, are you there? Liz Murphy coming out with the JFK Library, 4-time Jeopardy winner, okay? So, come on! Come on!
Thank you,
John Lithgow.
Robin Young. Thank you.